All right. Welcome to the last talk of the day. This is the EFF panel. So as a recovering attorney myself, it is my immense pleasure to bring to you Nate, Kurt, Jenny, Jamie, and Erica from the EFF.
All right, hello everybody. Great to be back here at BSidesSF San Francisco. We've been here for many years, been enjoying it all the time. Lovely to work with this community. My name is Kurt Opsahl. I'm the Deputy Executive Director and General Counsel with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And thank you. I take it many of you already know what EFF is, and we appreciate that. For the guy, someone out there who doesn't, we are a nonprofit civil liberties organization dedicated to defending your rights online. And in particular for this community, we work on the Coders' Rights Project, where we help security researchers understand about the legal issues surrounding their research and when they want to talk about their research, and try and make sure that people can do the research they need to do and can talk about the results that they find. So this is the Ask the EFF panel. So this is where mostly it's going to be your questions. After we give some brief introductions, we're going to be looking for audience questions. And I believe we'll have people line up over here by the corner of the stage. And then Nate will use that mic to allow people to ask their questions. One quick word is that while we do provide legal advice to people, this is not the time for that. If you have a legal question about your personal circumstances, that should be done in a confidential communication, not on stage in front of a lot of people, just in case there are some things that you're going to want to remain confidential. So with that word of warning, let me turn it. We'll go down the line here with just a minute or two talking about the things that we've been up to over the last year, and then we'll turn to your questions. So, Erica?
Hi, I am Erica Portnoy, and I am an engineer on CertBot, which is EFF's Let's Encrypt client. Let's Encrypt is a free automated certificate authority that is bringing encryption to the web. It's been a pretty exciting time for Let's Encrypt these last few months. In September, when I started working on CertBot, we had roughly 8 million websites that we served, depending how you count. And last I checked a couple days ago, we were at 25 million. So it's exciting to see the impact that we've had, and there's also, of course, tons of work to be done. I personally work on the client, where we're working on making sure that for the long tail of use cases, we can meet your needs and keep hitting all those tough-to-get configurations, and also make sure that it's as stable as it can be for the people who are already using it, and we're pushing towards our 1.0 release.
I'm Gennie Gebhart. I'm a researcher on EFF's activism team. My broad area of focus is researching consumer privacy and security, looking a lot at different tech company policies and practices. I also spend a lot of time working on open access, working on zero rating and net neutrality, and working on censorship in repressive states.
You can grab this one.
Okay, we'll show this.
Hello, I'm Jamie Williams. I am a lawyer on EFF's Civil Liberties team, so I focus mostly on free speech and privacy issues. I also do a lot involving the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and state computer crime statutes. We got a really good ruling out of Oregon last year on the state computer crime statute, so that was good. And then what else? I've been doing some work on compelled decryption cases. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
I'm Nate Cardozo. I'm a senior staff attorney on EFF's Digital Civil Liberties team. I work on the Coders' Rights Project, defending people like you against people like... I work on our crypto policy. I work on our Who Has Your Back report when we evaluate what companies are doing to protect users from the government. I am suing the government of Ethiopia for wiretapping an American. That's a fun one. I had an Ethiopian government spy up in my face taking pictures of me a week before last, and I gave him my business card, which is, if you know me, a serious insult. So ask me for your business card later. That's the sort of stuff I do. And on that note, I'm going to have this microphone over here, and we will answer any of the questions that you could possibly ask. And if we don't know the answer, we will tell you that we don't know the answer and refer it to one of our colleagues. And on that note,
yeah, let's get to your questions.
Thank you. So I am a director of technology for a school district here in the Bay Area, and I spend a lot of time looking at fun things like SEPA and COPPA and FERPA and et cetera. And I have concerns about what is going on with policy in schools with regards to, it seems like the actual legal policy is more about like, oh Lord, don't let the babies see that, as opposed to let's actually protect them from things like teachers being lax with data, etc. And I'm wondering if you have any insights into where education policy is going with regards to privacy, student privacy, data privacy, etc. And what I, as someone in the education space, should be doing to try to advocate for my students.
Great question. Thanks for that. One of the big things we're working on right now is a student privacy initiative, and we're looking at having kind of a more in-depth white paper coming out relatively soon. But as far as what people in the education space should be doing, it's hard to give one-size-fits-all advice. I think one of the things we're discovering in our research, we did a survey of kind of 1,000 people and change in student privacy space, parents, students, teachers, administrators. I think like 600 different apps and services were reported to us as like things in use at my school. And that's 600 privacy policies or lack thereof, we discovered. So it's hard to rely on the policies, kind of privacy by policy. I'll say, not even as advice, but one thing that we're seeing some sysadmin do and some administrators and teachers do is try as much as they can to rely on very like local privacy by practice. Like, can we crank down the privacy settings on these Chromebooks or on the apps we're using? Can we find allies like librarians are kind of like the privacy ninjas in your school and community? Can we talk to people to get contract negotiations going, to get people really looking at privacy policies in terms of service? Yeah, I think, Nate, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have as part of our student privacy initiative is a set of guides for students, parents, and school administrators on how to lock down their settings only for one product.
Yeah.
For Google Apps for Education, which is now called G Suite for Education. I don't know why they changed that name. So we have a guide on EFF.org/student privacy.
And also, if you see any terrible policies in your schools and your kids, you can reach out to us. We have helped parents talk to schools, and we've actually had progress. The one policy we were working with in Tennessee had terrible policy on First and Fourth Amendment issues, and we got a little progress in getting them to make it better. So, info@EFF.org.
And we're also happy to refer you to local attorneys in your district, wherever that district happens to be.
Hi, everybody. I just want to say, first off, thank you very much for keeping my dumb ass out of jail. I'm a security researcher, so keep doing that. Second of all, recently the EFF put out a notification about we should upgrade our threat model given the new administration coming in. And one of the big things I think of in that is the idea of secure communication. So how do I communicate details with different people given the fact that there might be people trying to listen that have a lot of resources? So given the recent issues with some of the major clients such as Signal, what does the EFF recommend that I use to make sure that my communication is safe? Even if, maybe even not from nation state, but very powerful people.
So you mentioned recent problems with Signal. I'm not sure I know which ones you're talking about.
The whole idea that Signal basically has a dependency on Google Cloud services, and that possibly leading to some
Okay, so the nice thing about end-to-end encryption is that even if it has a reliance, you still only get availability that you lose, which is, better than other things. Our cliched answer is use Signal, use Tor. But that obviously isn't necessarily going to meet all of your specific needs. So if you have specific ones, I would, number one, always say go to ssd.eff.org. That's our surveillance self-defense guide, which has things for every possibility. For messaging services, you probably, like, end-to-end encryption does the trick. It's what you want there. The math will still work no matter what's going on underneath.
This is the Ask EFF panel. Come to me on this side of the stage if you need to ask a question. Right now, there is no waiting at the Ask EFF panel. I'll talk a little bit more about the signal threat model. So depending on whether you're Apple or Android, Google or Apple may know a little bit about how you use Signal, but they don't necessarily know who you're talking to and when. They know when you're receiving a message and maybe from whom. They might not know when you're sending it, and they probably know to whom. But anyway, it's not the same threat. It's a lot less information that Google and Apple have if you're using Signal than if you're using SMS or iMessage.
Yeah, hi. So I'm not from the US. I'm on a green card, and I'm very afraid of what we have now with the fact that when I cross the border, what we're hearing now is that we have to give our phones, but also give our passwords, which to me sounds, it's not legal to do, but I have no idea, and that's why I, first of all, I really appreciate what you guys do, really appreciate that you guys do this panel, and basically I want to know, like, I could understand that they can take my phone, but they force me to give them my credentials. It sounds really crazy, so where are we at? Is that legal? Is there something that I can do? Is this really something that is not legal, but I don't care, you just don't come in if you don't like it? Because that really puts me in an impossible situation, right? My career is here, my life is here, and I don't want to give my credentials.
Thank you for that. I mean, this is something that we're looking at very closely. We've been seeing more and more reports of people being asked to turn over their devices and their passwords at the border, and it is pretty challenging. I mean, one of the things that's most challenging about it is that for those who are here on a visa, that they can be placed in a situation where they're asked for consent to turn this over, and they can refuse to give that consent, but they might not be allowed in the country as a result, and that puts a lot of pressure on people. And I, till recently, would have made a differentiation between legal permanent residents, green card holders, and visa holders, but we have seen that the current administration is sort of moving the category of legal permanent residents closer to visa holders as opposed to closer to citizenships. So I think that is very troubling, but it may in fact be happening. What we have done, at least right now, is ask people to come to us with their stories. If this happens to them, if you know someone who had this happen to them when they came to the border, please have them contact us, info@eff.org, because we're trying to turn some of these anecdotal stories that we've been seeing on social media into more concrete stories, having direct communications with people, and basically to see if there's something that we can do about this situation. For someone who does have a right to come back into the country, we don't think that can be conditioned on turning over your social media passwords. But also keep in mind that if you want to stand up for that right at the border, you may be hanging out at the border for some time. So if you want to do that, you probably should, if you're considering doing that, have a lawyer that you can contact before you're hitting the border. Have them know when you're expected, and be sort of prepared to deal with that. You know, there are other things that you might do. You can not have you turn your phone off, delete some apps on it before you cross the border. Though they may notice that those are deleted, and that independently could cause you trouble at the border. Nate, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things you can do as a non-citizen when you're coming back into the United States. The biggest one is to have something called a G28 form already signed by you and your attorney. We've heard a lot of things that the Trump administration is preventing lawyers from seeing people in detention. That only happens when they don't have a G28 already signed. So if you have that pre-executed when you're coming back into the country, it may well save you a lot of trouble. For citizens, for US citizens who are coming back into the United States, there are 2 rules of thumb that you need to remember. Number 1, they cannot deny you entry, full stop. Number 2, they can take your stuff, and there's not much you can do about it. You can get it back later probably, but if they give you the choice between, if they say enter your password right now or you can't come into the country, they are bluffing. But when they say we're going to take your stuff unless you enter your password, they are not bluffing. So do that calculus.
I just want to add, we also this is like brand new, we created a special email address for border stories, borders@EFF.org. So if you or anyone you know has encountered some searches at the border, let us know.
And also to get that G28 form, it's available online. You can just do a search for G28 form, G-28, and you should be able to find that right quick.
Yeah, so the G28 form is a power of attorney form. It says, this is my attorney for immigration purposes only. It registers that attorney, or it allows that attorney to represent that he or she represents you to the CBP or ICE when you're coming back into the States.
All right, thank you.
I have one more quick thing to add, if that's okay. I think for this audience in particular, some technical and legal advice has been flying around online. I know Wired released kind of a guide recently. And just like a word of caution as we're all kind of like learning more about this threat model vacuum we kind of face at the border, there's a lot of technical advice that's really cool and really clever and high speed and sounds really fun to implement. But it could also be terrible legal advice. Like there's really cool stuff you could do to obscure things on your device or like hide different environments from CBP, but it can also land you into a lot of legal and kind of practical hot water. So just kind of watch out for that as there's more and more commentary on this.
G'day, just wanted to first of all thank you guys, you've done a great job. You've put out a pretty good threat model guide online. Could you give us 2 things the average employee living in the United States, potentially a foreigner, could do with their iPhone to improve their security model and improve their privacy? Off to you.
Like 2 things you can like change on an iPhone? Like, are we talking about like hardening settings? Wait, do you mean like harden your settings on your iPhone? That kind of thing?
Yeah, so just everyone sitting here today, what could we do, like from the settings, or always make sure you go in via a VPN, or do you go into your settings and stop geotagging? What's the 2 things everyone here could do today?
Okay. Yeah, there's many things, but 2 big ones that immediately come to mind. First of all, regardless of your device, do not have the fingerprint unlock thing. Don't do that. That's not cool. It seems cool. It's not. And one reason is that law enforcement or border patrol, they can compel you to put your thumb on something. Like, they can compel you to take a fingerprint. They cannot compel you to put in a password. So get rid of the fingerprint unlock thing, have a code, longer the better. The second thing, which applies, I guess, to things you might do on your iPhone or on any device, 2-factor authentication. Enable it for your various accounts. Using whatever makes the most sense for you. Often that's an authenticator app like Google Authenticator. It could be SMS. It could be a hardware token like YubiKey. Those are the first 2 things that come to my mind, at least.
Also, remember that you can use end-to-end encryption all you want, but if you're doing an unencrypted cloud backup, then your end-to-end encryption is essentially useless. WhatsApp, for instance, prompts you repeatedly to back up your texts to Google or Apple Cloud. Those backups are accessible to the provider and to the government, even if the message is in flight or not. So think about your threat model. If you're actually using sensitive communications, if you actually need end-to-end encryption, for the love of God, turn off the cloud backup.
And tell your friends to turn them off too.
Hi. I was just wondering, do you guys have any advice for municipal corporations that provide internet access or fiber optic services? So, like a municipal light plant Where I come from, different towns can start in ISP, or they can sell fiber optic services. Do you have any policies or resources to make sure that we're making this as open and fair to the public as possible?
I think the answer is yes. None of us here work on municipal Wi-Fi issues.
Not for a while, but I mean, this is something that we have definitely been looking at. I mean, there is a little bit of an irony, is to say that the answer to trying to get you better communications is to work with a government organization. But municipalities are generally on the more popularly responsive end of government organizations, and have done, in many cities, have ones which are more privacy protective and also high speed and free or low cost versus the other environments that are out there. There's been a fair amount of pressure from some of the larger service providers to try and stop municipalities from competing with them. And in some places they've actually passed laws in which they say the municipalities of that state or jurisdiction can't offer something competitive with the existing commercial entities. But nevertheless, this is becoming more of a thing. I think the key issues are making sure that you are not sacrificing a lot of your privacy and autonomy by using a municipal service, so that it needs to be transparent about what its practices are, and that you can be using it without having additional tracking of what you're doing held by that government agency. But by and large, municipalities have been pretty cool with that, though occasionally some have fallen victim to a provider that says we will do this for your town, but only if we get to track everybody in your town and what they're doing online and send them ads based on it. So it's something worth looking at to see if that's right for your community.
Okay, no waiting. If you want to ask a question, come down on your left.
I have another border crossing question. So as a rule, I turn off all my devices crossing the border. And I've noticed that the TSA, if you're selected for like the 4S's, the special screening, the TSA asks you to turn on your laptop to verify that it turns on. And my question is this a situation where I should assert my rights? What are my rights in that situation? Just don't do it?
If they ask you to turn on a device, turn it on. If they ask you to unlock a device, if you're a US citizen, hell no. Don't do it.
Yeah, it should be enough to show the unlock screen before you put the password to show that it's not actually a bomb, but it is a functioning computer. And so they shouldn't have to ask you to unlock it. If it's just a question of unlocking it, sometimes people will have a guest account on their computer, so you can log in with the guest account to show that it's a viable, functioning computer without giving access to the rest of your machine. But really, all they should be able to look at, or should be looking at, is that it is a computer and not something masquerading as a computer. And you can show that by turning it on enough to get to the unlock screen.
So to my knowledge, no court has ever addressed that question. And I actually read border search cases pretty regularly. So that is actually an unanswered question at law. So the answer we gave you is what we think the law probably will be if it is ever addressed by a court.
Just turn it back off after.
Right, just turn it back off after.
I mean.
All right, well, you have a question?
Yep.
Great, come on up.
So, as much as I may love Signal and wish that everybody would switch over to it, it seems like that's a really tall order for the world at large. What is the EFF doing, or what can we do to try to encourage the service providers that already have well-established and adopted messaging platforms to get onto end-to-end encryption and other good practices?
So we have robust dialogues with a number of companies. We have a call coming up next week with WhatsApp, for instance. WhatsApp does do end-to-end encryption, but they have some significant issues with the way they implemented that, not in terms of the protocol, but in terms of other things. So we think that end-to-end encryption should be ubiquitous. iMessage, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger and Allo did it in a way that we don't think is good at all, but they're at least thinking about starting it.
Yes, I can add, I think on the topic of Allo and Facebook Messenger, like that's where, I mean, Facebook Messenger, at least where a lot of people already are, and it doesn't demand a lot of additional adoption. The issue that we've had is that it's kind of optional encrypted, and there's two reasons that is a problem. Like, I think the good thing that Nate covered is like they're thinking about it. There are engineers there who are pushing this forward, and that is, I think, a victory for kind of thinking about encryption and making it more available to users. The two big problems are, one, that it's confusing. Neither Facebook nor Google's Allo call it end-to-end encryption. They call it like incognito or secret mode. And then in the UI itself, it's very easy to make a mistake, to send something not end-to-end encrypted that you meant to send in the darker encrypted mode. So first, it's confusing and users can make mistakes. Second, it teaches, although it maybe increases awareness and adoption, we're worried that it will teach the wrong lessons about encryption. It'll teach you like, oh, only use end-to-end encryption when you want to do secret, shady things, and essentially raise a red flag in your communications like, hey, secret, shady things right here. So I think it's, in some ways it's a step forward, in some ways it's 2 steps back. But yes, the robust dialogues continue on that.
If you would like to make your voice heard to a particular messaging app that you regularly use, a way to get people's attention is to go into an app store and leave a 1-star review. Because once you get enough 1-star reviews, it becomes somebody's job to see why the ratings are falling, and when they go and read the comments along with it, make sure, don't just like leave a 1-star review, leave a comment saying, I would give this a higher rating, but I have secure messaging needs and it is not meeting my needs, so I'm forced to give this a 1-star review. There is a human being whose job it is to read those reviews, and they will see that.
Okay, thank you for your service. This, again, is a border crossing question. What about if the person coming back to the United States is an American citizen, but they're underage as far as the right to not disclose their password on mobile devices or whatever?
The age of someone coming into the country shouldn't matter for these purposes. The government cannot compel a U.S. citizen to disclose their password whether they're over or under 18, absent some unusual circumstances that we were not going to get into here. But the age shouldn't matter.
I mean, there's a possibility that their parents could consent on their behalf, but hopefully their parents would have their kids back on this and not give them up.
This doesn't relate to at the border, but we actually last year filed an amicus brief with the ACLU in a case involving juveniles being forced, or kids on probation being forced to give over their social media passwords as a condition of probation, which is insane. So yeah, if you're interested, check out our website, or our the post is there. And I mean, and we argue it's basically the same as a wiretap, that invasive. Obviously, the technical things are different, but yeah.
What about creating a social media account, a new one, and the password is FU 5 times? You want me to repeat that password?
Sure, why not? Sure, why not?
One of the things that happened, I think it was about a year ago, with Apple and the iPhone obligation to write software to crack iPhones. It's something that has gone sort of by the wayside. I feel like this hasn't been addressed as far as I know. So yeah, what do you think the motivation was for them even bringing that up if they felt that they had kits to break that anyway? And so 2 parts of the question is, what was their motivation for that, and are you guys still responding to it, or do you consider it an issue that will just come up naturally in the future? And rootkits for breaking phones, or kits where you can just plug in a phone and scrape all the data off of it, I mean, that's under 4th Amendment, isn't it? I mean, why are we even having a debate that it seems like they could do that without? Yeah.
So your first question was why did they bring that case if they could if they could hack into the phone? Yeah. Okay, so this comes up a lot. It was a terrorism case. They thought it was probably going to be easy for them to get like good law forcing Apple to unlock the phone and set great precedent that they could use in cases across the board. I mean, that's why they picked a terrorism case. That's why a lot of bad law comes from terrorism and child pornography cases. We work on a lot of those cases. So trying to hold the Constitution for everybody in those cases where the judges are going to be less sympathetic. But yeah, the public outcry was amazing in that case. They didn't win. They backed away. But I think it's not gone. We're definitely going to keep fighting this. I think that the new administration has been busy with other things, but there's definitely been terrible, like, what did Sessions called for backdoors, or he endorsed backdoors the other day.
Yeah, so our new Attorney General, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, has called explicitly for backdoors in technology. Luckily, the House Judiciary Committee has, the Republican House Judiciary Committee has rejected legislative backdoors. So that's awesome. Thank you, Representative Goodlatte. But who knows what's going to happen in the next, 4 years.
Pay attention. We need to fight ahead.
And just to add a little bit to Jamie's point there, is that at the same time as the Apple iPhone case, there was another case involving an Apple iPhone. There was a San Bernardino case involving terrorism, and there was one out in Brooklyn that was involving a meth dealer. So the meth dealer case came first. It was ongoing when they brought the San Bernardino case, and I think they preferred to have that issue decided when looking at something with sort of higher stakes than a local Brooklyn meth dealer. But however, they lost the meth dealer case. The judge ruled against them. But they dropped the appeal of that, and they dropped the San Bernardino case, so there is no binding nationwide precedent one way or the other. So we're going to be back there and dealing with this question. I mean, there's the question of backdoors as a good idea, and there's sort of a separate but related question. Can you force coders to write code that they don't want to write, that they don't believe in? Can you tell them what to say? And we think this actually hits on some very important First Amendment issues. Code is speech, and compelled speech is just as challenging as telling people what they can't say. So if you go to a coder and say you got to rewrite your code to do something which is against your principles, that independently is a problem. But this issue will definitely come up again, and it'll just be a matter of time.
Thank you for your work. We all appreciate it. I have a question specifically about California. In the Sacramento, the legislature is working on approving speed cameras, and so there's potential surveillance use. And from talking to the San Francisco MTA staff, they've been working with you, your group, and ACLU, among other stakeholders, on what the privacy implications on that are. I was hoping you could speak to that a little bit.
I think that's probably our colleagues Jen and Dave, neither of whom are here right now. So we are monitoring those sorts of issues, but none of the 5 of us know anything about it. Sorry.
Yeah, we actually have a legislative team who focuses their efforts in Sacramento and in DC, but so obviously there's just like the general privacy implications there. Jen, our colleague, works on license plate data and is going to be arguing that case soon, a case challenging collection of and lack of transparency around those records.
Okay, I think this is probably our last question. Last question.
So hitchhiking on that a little bit. So most of us here have a representative, 2 senators, a bunch of state people. Do you have some resource we can go to tell them, well, first of all, to know what questions even ask to have a policy on, and second of all, to sort of have a form letter to like say, hey, yeah, we don't like backdoors, etc. Is there a resource to help us?
Yes, the Action Center, right?
Well, I guess you were saying, like, were you asking what questions to ask? Yeah. What do you do? Yeah. So what, action.eff.org?
Act.
Not
Act.eff.org.
action. The verb, act.eff.org. That is where you can go for kind of, depending on the campaign, to email your representative, to call them, to tweet at them. You put in your address or your zip code, and it tells you exactly where you're going to go. There are templates, there are forms. We make it as easy as possible, specifically for EFF issues.
And if you sign up on our mailing list, we will email blast when one of these actions is really urgent. So like when SOPA PIPA happened, it was because 200,000 of you called your representatives that SOPA PIPA didn't happen.
Oh yeah, we also have an app which you can also use to track those action opportunities.
And Android only. So
Oh, yeah.
our EFF Action Center app is Android only because the Apple App Store terms purport to limit what developers can say publicly. And EFF, as a free speech organization, would never agree to those terms. So we don't have an iPhone app.
All right, well, thank you everybody for coming. We will be, we're ending our Ask the EFF panel, but we will be around, so if you want to find us, the booth is on the second floor in the back corner there, if you want to stop by and maybe become a member, get some swag, and you can also just find us around here and ask any other questions you might have. But in the meantime, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your B-sides, and we'll see you around.
So that concludes our last presentation today. On behalf of B-Sides and Fitbit, I'm going to present each one of these freedom fighters with a brand new Fitbit. I also have two announcements to make. Starting now, next door at Buzzworks is Hacker Jeopardy. Also, HackerOne would like to invite everyone to hack the bar tab up here at CTF. Thank you, and have a good evening.